I'm 90 years old now, and there's something I've carried since 1953 that I never told another living soul. My name is James Porter, and I was a Marine in Korea. The kind of Marine they write about, steady hands, clear head, the one you wanted next to you when everything went to hell. But here's what nobody knew. I wasn't afraid of dying. I was afraid of them finding out I was terrified of living. We shipped out in February of '53, right before the armistice. I was 23 years old, from Birmingham, Alabama, and I'd grown up knowing exactly what the world thought of me before I ever opened my mouth. My father told me once that a black man in America had to be twice as good and half as loud, and I took that to heart. When I joined the Marines, I wasn't just representing myself. I was carrying every ancestor who'd been told they weren't worthy, every man who'd been lynched for looking at someone wrong, every mother who'd raised sons knowing the world might swallow them whole. So I became perfect. I followed every order to the letter. I kept my rifle cleaner than anyone else's. I never complained, never questioned, never showed weakness. And when we hit the ground in Korea, when the bullets started flying and the mortars shook the earth beneath us, I found something strange. I wasn't afraid. Not of that, anyway. Combat was simple. You moved, or you died. You covered your brothers, or they covered you. The rules were clear. Fear had a purpose. It kept you sharp, kept you alive. But there was another fear that lived in my chest, and it had nothing to do with enemy fire. It was the fear of being seen, really seen. Not as James Porter, the dependable Marine, the one who never flinched, but as the man underneath all that armor, the one who sometimes lay awake at night wondering if he'd ever be allowed to just exist without justifying his presence. The one who watched white soldiers joke and laugh and be careless with their emotions and wondered what it would feel like to have that kind of freedom. I had brothers in my unit, real brothers, men I would have died for without hesitation. There was Martinez, a kid from Texas who talked about his mother's cooking like it was heaven on a plate. There was O'Connor, who told the same 3 jokes over and over until we all had them memorized. And there was Davis, another black Marine from Detroit, who had this way of looking at you like he could see straight through to your bones. We shared cigarettes and rations and frozen foxholes. We pulled each other out of situations that should have killed us, but I never told them what I was really afraid of. One night we were dug in on this hill, waiting for dawn. It was so cold your breath turned to ice before it left your mouth. Martinez was shaking, not from the cold, but from fear. He'd just gotten a letter from home saying his father was sick, maybe dying, and he couldn't stop thinking about all the things he'd never said to the man. He looked at me and said, "Porter, you ever scared of anything?" And I said what I always said, "Just scared of letting you boys down." He nodded like that made sense, like that was a real answer. But it wasn't. It was another brick in the wall I'd built around myself. The truth was, I was scared of everything that waited for me after the war. I was scared of going home to Alabama and having to swallow my pride every time some white man called me boy. I was scared of working jobs that would never pay me what I was worth, in a country that had sent me to die for freedoms it wouldn't grant me. I was scared of the anger I felt deep down that had no outlet, no release, because showing that anger could get me killed just as surely as any bullet. And most of all, I was scared that if I ever let anyone see that fear, they'd think I was weak. They'd think I'd been lying about being strong all along. We came home in August of '53. The war ended, and we were supposed to just fold back into normal life like nothing had happened. I moved to Detroit, found work in a factory, married a good woman named Ruth who saw more of me than I wanted her to. We had 3 children. I went to work every morning, came home every night, provided for my family the way I was supposed to, and I never talked about Korea. Not the combat, not the cold, not the brothers I'd lost. Ruth would ask sometimes, gently, and I'd change the subject. My children would see me staring at nothing and ask if I was okay, and I'd tell them I was just tired. But the weight never left. It just shifted. In Korea, I'd carried a rifle and a pack. Back home, I carried something heavier, the knowledge that I'd spent my entire life performing strength instead of finding it. I'd been so busy proving I wasn't afraid of the things men are supposed to fear that I'd never dealt with the things that actually terrified me. Loneliness, invisibility, the possibility that I'd wasted decades of my life being who I thought I had to be instead of who I actually was. Davis found me in 1987, 34 years after we'd left Korea. He tracked me down through some veterans registry, called me up out of nowhere. We met at a diner in Detroit, and it was like no time had passed at all. Same laugh, same eyes, little grayer but still sharp. We talked about the old days, the cold nights, the close calls. And then he said something that stopped me cold. He said, "Porter, I always wondered if you were all right. You were the strongest man I knew over there, but you never let us in." "Not really. I used to worry you were carrying something alone that you didn't have to." I didn't know what to say. I sat there, 60 years old, looking at this man who'd been in hell with me, and I realized he'd seen it all along. He'd known I was hiding, and he'd cared anyway. I wanted to tell him everything right then. I wanted to explain that I'd been so afraid of being vulnerable that I'd built a prison around myself and called it strength, but the words wouldn't come. Even then, after all those years, I couldn't do it. I just said, "I'm all right, brother. Always have been." And I saw the disappointment in his eyes, just for a second, before he let it go. Davis passed away in 2003. Heart attack, sudden and final. I didn't get to say goodbye. I didn't get to tell him the truth. And that's when it really hit me. All those years, I told myself I was protecting my brothers by being strong, by never showing weakness, by carrying my burdens alone. But what if I'd been robbing them of something too? What if they'd needed to know that I struggled, that I hurt, that I was human just like them? What if my silence hadn't protected anyone, it had just made us all more alone? I'm 90 years old now, and most of my brothers are gone. Martinez, O'Connor, Davis, all of them in the ground. And I'm still here, finally willing to say the thing I should have said 70 years ago. I was afraid, not of bullets or bombs or death. I was afraid of being seen as less than what I needed to be. Afraid that if I showed my fear, my pain, my humanity, I'd prove right everyone who'd ever said I didn't belong. And that fear cost me more than any war ever could. Ruth asks me sometimes why I'm talking about this now, after all these years of silence. And I tell her it's because I finally understand something. Strength isn't about never being afraid. It's not about standing alone and refusing help. Real strength is looking someone in the eye and saying, "I'm struggling and I need you." It's letting people see you whole, broken parts and all, and trusting that they won't turn away. That's the courage I never had. That's what I wish I could have given my brothers. If you're carrying something alone right now, if you're hiding behind a version of yourself that you think you need to be, I'm asking you to reconsider. Not because I have all the answers, but because I wasted so much of my life on the wrong kind of strength. The men I served with didn't need me to be perfect. They needed me to be real. And I robbed them of that, and I robbed myself of it too, because I was too afraid to be vulnerable. I think about Korea sometimes, about those cold nights on that hill, and I imagine a different version of that conversation with Martinez. I imagine him asking if I'm afraid, and instead of giving him the armor-plated answer, I tell him the truth. I say, "Yeah, brother, I'm terrified. Not of dying here, but of going home and having to be invisible again, of never mattering the way we matter to each other right now." And maybe he would have understood. Maybe he would have said he felt the same way. Maybe we all could have carried it together instead of alone. But I didn't say it, and now all I have are these words, offered too late to the men who needed to hear them, but maybe not too late for you. Whatever you're afraid of, whatever you're hiding, whatever mask you're wearing because you think you have to, it's heavier than you know. And the people who love you, the people who stand beside you, they're strong enough to see you without it. They're strong enough to see you without it. Trust them. Trust yourself. Be human. Be afraid. Be real. That's all I have left to say. I'm 90 years old, and I spent most of my life being the wrong kind of brave. Don't make my mistake. The war isn't worth winning if you lose yourself in the process.